when Rage Against the Machine released their self-titled debut album in 1992. It really was a seminal moment for rap rock. The fury of Zach De La Rocha, the ingenious fresh approach to guitar playing of Tom Morello, and the incredible musicianship of Tim Commerford and Brad Wilk meant that this new band from LA were impossible to ignore, exploding straight through the alternative scene and straight into mainstream consciousness within 2 years. The band only formed just over a year before entering the studio to record their debut album, and had the majority of the material written for it the same year they were formed. Their 12-song demo cassette contained many of the big songs that would form the core of the album. This incredible footage of their first live performance shows just how ready they were from the outset. This demo cassette was sold at gigs to their ever-growing fanbase, eventually selling 5,000 copies. It didn't take long for this attention to be noticed by the record labels, with lots of offers coming their way. They eventually signed to Epic Records, as according to Morello, Epic agreed to everything we asked, and they followed through. We never saw an ideological conflict, as long as we maintained creative control. The main recording sessions took place at Sound City Studios in Van Nuys, California, with some additional recording done after at Scream Studios. The only song that was tracked elsewhere was Bullet in the Head at Industrial Recording in North Hollywood. Heading the sessions was co-producer Garth Richardson, who was relatively unknown as a producer at this point, but was massively enthusiastic about working for the band after hearing them perform. Garth was fully aware that the power of the band couldn't be captured by the standard method of laying down the drums and then building everything else on top layer by layer. It had to be live, and delivered with the same passion as one of their shows. In order to create this environment, they placed the band in the live room all together, with the guitar and bass amps in another room. A feed from these amps was then brought into the live room via PA speakers for the band to hear. The guitar amp recordings remain isolated from any vocal and drum bleed, and the drums were slightly shielded from the PA by acoustic panels. The drums were also very close mic'd in order to minimise the sound of the PA. Zach used the Shure SM58 for the vocals, which did a great job of off-axis rejection of the PA and the drums. Even with this familiar and comfortable setup, the band was still struggling with being in a clinical studio environment, so Morello came up with the idea of further making it like live shows by actually making it a live show, inviting guests down to watch them track the songs. Around 60 people were in attendance to watch them make history, but were on strict instructions not to make any noise, especially at the end of the songs. It was tracked using Sound City's incredible Neve 8028 console, famously featured in Dave Grohl's documentary on the studio, and according to Garth, really did add a magic to the recording, with the desk EQ being used to sculpt the sounds they needed with ease. He also said that very little in the way of outboard processing was used, and with the album sleeve proudly noting that no samples, keyboards or synthesizers were used in the making of this record. It was actually Morello's guitar work and pedal board that provided all the modulation effects. Being heavily inspired by the hip-hop sensibilities of bands like Public Enemy, Morello sought to emulate a DJ in some of the aspects of his guitar playing, by emulating the rhythmical sound of scratching, which gave the band a hugely unique identity that was integral to the whole sound of the record. In order to achieve this effect, he had a toggle switch that would go between the neck and the bridge pickup, so as it was flicked back and forth quickly with one of the pickups switched off, it would act like a kill switch and produce that desired effect. His main guitar for the album was known as his Arm the Homeless guitar after what he later wrote on it. He bought the guitar in 1986, but he was unhappy with it from the very beginning, and eventually he replaced everything except the main body itself. One of the most important adjustments was a single coil EMG H pickup in the neck position and an EMG 85 humbucker in the bridge. Also, the neck is a graphite knockoff Kramer neck. This was found in a bin at Nadine's Music. He proclaimed that he was never actually perfectly happy with it, but decided not to tinker anymore and just get on with what he had. And it's remained his main instrument for anything in standard tuning to this day. The other really important guitar was his Fender Telecaster, used for drop D tuning songs such as Killing in the Name and Freedom. Its nickname is the Sendero Luminoso, after the sticker that he put on it. The only other guitar he used was his Gibson Les Paul. After borrowing an engineer's Les Paul to do overdubs on the Bullet in the Head demo, he decided that he needed his own, and bought one in 1992 from West LA Music. Morello said, "Why did I choose this one? Because it was the colour of Taco Bell hot sauce, a staple food group of mine at the time. It became my principal overdub guitar, and is heard on Killing in the Name, Freedom and Township Rebellion amongst others. It was great for backing up my telly. His amp was the 50-watt Marshall JCM 800 2205, going into a PV VTM 4x12 cabinet. Apparently this combo setup was bought in haste after being robbed, and he wasn't initially keen on having the PV, even unscrewing the badge before he took it out for the first time. The amp's tone positions were marked out early on after getting it, and he hasn't changed them since. The speakers in the PV are believed to be the Celestion G12K 85s. His all-important pedal board featured the Ibanez DFL flanger used for the intro to Killing in the Name, the Dodd FX40B EQ, mainly used as a signal booster, the Boss DD2 delay, which was actually used more as a reverb type effect, with a slapback delay to create some space, the Digitech Whammy, which is probably the most influential part of his board, which was made to create those radical, un-guitar-like sounds. This was made possible by extreme pitch shifting that you can hear on the solo of Killing in the Name. He also used the Dunlop Crybaby for tonal changes. It's very interesting that it didn't have any distortion or overdrive pedals, and instead used his amp's overdrive channel, and to create a cleaner sound, he just rolled off the volume on the guitar. The cab was mic'd up by the Sennheiser MD421 plus a Shure SM57. Tim Commerford used his Ernie Ball Stingray SR4 into an SWR Redhead amp, or Super Redhead, with his pedals including the Marshall Governor for the distorted sound, most prominently heard on Know Your Enemy. He also used the Boss Phase Shifter and the Boss DS1. The amp was mic'd up using the Sennheiser MD421 plus a Neumann FET 47. Brad Wilks played a Gretsch drum kit with a Tama bell brass snare, and this was mic'd up using an MD421 inside the kick with a FET 47 out, SM57 both top and bottom of the snare, RE20s on the toms, and the cymbals were close mic using the AKG 452s. A stereo pair of AKG 414s were also used. As mentioned earlier, it was important to get a tight, powerful sound from the drums, despite the PA in the room, so the engineers had to make some adjustments to facilitate this, due to the proximity of their use. After everything was tracked and minimal overdubs were completed, the tapes then went off to legendary mixing engineer Andy Wallace. Andy was very hot at the time, having mixed many big records including Nirvana's Nevermind, a record the band were huge fans of. Andy's influence on the overall sound was fairly subtle, as little extra ambience was included. Although one of the notable signature sounds he had at the time came through his use of the Yamaha SPX90 effects unit, and in particular the symphonic preset, which was a form of chorusing. This helped to give certain elements like vocals and even bass guitars a nice width and presence. The album was released in November '92, along with the first single Killing in the Name the same month, which gained heavy radio play and helped the band get noticed pretty quickly. It was their appearance on '93's Lollapalooza tour that really saw the sales of the record start to take off though, selling 400,000 copies by the end of the year. By the end of '96, it had sold more than 3 million copies worldwide and inspired many other bands along the way. The excitement of a kick-ass rock band and a rapping frontman with a furious delivery, in my opinion, was never bettered than the moment I heard Rage Against the Machine for the very first time.